I have great pleasure in welcoming all the participants to the 21st session of the World University Summit that we've been having since yesterday. And these sessions are, the audience is mostly online, and each of us is in our different locations. So I'm very grateful and honored to be asked to address and moderate the discussion. I don't know about the word moderation. We don't expect fisticuffs and someone mediating or moderating. I suppose it just means someone who expected to draw the best out of the wonderful set of panelists that we have. And the panelists that we have are, KRITIKA BHANDHARI, who's from the Vijaybhoomi University, Professor ANANYA MUKHERJEE, who's Vice Chancellor at the Shiv University, Dr. PRAMATH SINHA, who, many things, and the founder of and chairperson of Ashoka University. We have Dr. Vidya Yeravedkar, who's the Pro-Chancellor of Symbiosis University. So I won't take up too much time, going through their bios and their very distinguished record and contributions to higher education. But just speaking for myself, I think I'm the only person in this conversation who spent a great deal of my working life, some 30 years, in the business of giving away money. I started my career as a program officer in the Ford Foundation in the Delhi office, and then joined the United Nations Development Program. And both institutions were in the business of making grants. So I'm someone who has come from the other side, so to speak, having been on the grant giving or the grant making side of things, and leaders in universities have been recipients of these grants in the United States. Universities, higher education takes a good proportion of grants that are made by foundations and individual philanthropists and alumni of different universities. And in our country, we know that, the Indian Institutes of Technology, the Indian Institutes of Management, the agricultural universities all started out with substantial grants from the Ford Foundation. And even they were all established under acts of legislatures, and so they were public universities that received philanthropic grants. But I don't know the present situation with respect to what these foreign foundations do. It's also the case that many distinguished alumni of Western universities have contributed to those universities. We have the Mittal Center at Harvard. We have, a number of the Hindujas at Oxford, and so on. So people of Indian origin and Indian philanthropists have not only supported Indian universities, but they've also supported universities of which they have been alumni. So that's a broad setting, but for the purposes of this conversation, I'd like each of you to lead off with the very general point about what is the nature and the role of philanthropy in the context of Indian higher education. We needn't talk about the United States or Europe. We won't have the time for that. So may I start off with KRITIKA? Take a few minutes to share your reflections, and we'll go along with the other panelists, and then try and see if we can agree upon zeroing in on something that's of interest that deserves a more in-depth discussion, because with a very general title like public, private, and universities, higher education, philanthropy. These are key words, but we need to make our conversation more purposeful than the title might suggest. So, Kritika, over to you.
Thank you so much, Professor SUDARSHAN, and I think I'm truly grateful and humbled by this opportunity to be on this panel today. I think being the youngest with so many stalwarts on the panel, I think I should restrict my ideas and my words to just a few. Firstly, I think in terms of my opening remarks, I think let's just sort of contextualize it and what we were speaking about before we went live, that what is the context in which we are looking at this discussion today. So if we look at the topic of promoting philanthropy for public-private partnership, I think we're primarily today looking at it in terms of research and how it can promote our goal of furthering education for our students and promoting our faculty ecosystems. Now, broadly, once we think about it, I think largely it might be fair for me to say that all of us unanimously would agree on this panel here that higher education, and since we're talking specifically about the Indian context, is not something that we can see in extremes, that where we're looking at only purely a public model or we are purely looking at a private model only. I think we're all looking at a model where collaboration is going to be key, and we're looking at a public-private partnership model. Having said that, there are a few initial remarks which I would like to start with, because eventually I think this is something that we will develop with the few questions that we have lined up after in the moderated conversation. So I think first things first, for any successful partnership, I think it's very, very important that there needs to be meeting of minds and there has to be an alignment of objectives. Having said that, I mean, the three main stakeholders that we're talking about in this case are A, institutions, B, we're talking about government entities, and three, we're talking about corporates. So corporates, while they have their own profit-making objectives, when it comes to philanthropy, there are certain causes. Every entity aligns itself with certain causes that they espouse through their philanthropic projects and through the CSR that they do. When we talk about the government today, the government is expected to be a solution provider, provide solution to all kinds of economic, social, financial problems in the country. Now, when we come to universities, we are basically, even in terms of universities, there is a certain mission and vision that every university has, and there is a certain direction that every university takes in terms of how they want to promote their student learning within their ecosystem and how they want to promote activities of their faculty. So for any successful partnership, I feel it's very important that all these three entities need to align on a particular objective. Only then the partnership can be result-oriented, can be outcome-oriented, as well as it can be a long and sustained model today. Second thing I think that's really important, since a lot of us here come from private institutions, is the fact that when we talk about philanthropy and mobilization of funds, probably it is not wrong to say this, that when it comes to private institutions, the scenario is now changing slowly and steadily, but we have generally been seen with a tainted lens. That whenever you talk about private institutions, there are these questions about funding. There are questions about how the money is being used, how there can be disguised profiteering and other things like that. So I feel that there is this extra added onus, burden, and responsibility on us as private institutions to actually take a step further and be more transparent. Be more transparent about our governance structures, be more transparent about our financial information. Third would be that I think for us to actually seed this idea and make it a part of an ecosystem where all these three entities are working in collaboration together, I think the initial burden is definitely on institutions today to take a bigger role and try to create ecosystems where we are effectively trying to offer services, maybe in terms of consulting services, research services, that we are solving problems of both these entities today that largely, affect them today. So when I say that, what I typically mean is that we need to try to espouse such causes, or we need to establish such centers today, or we need to establish such chairs today in our institutions, where we are looking at solving problems, or we are addressing concerns that we know that both of these entities, be it the government or the corporates, at this point of time may not have the time or the bandwidth to deal with, that they can outsource to us. Because somewhere I feel that is where it starts building that trust, and it would start bridging the trust deficit that is being created. And once we establish our credibility, I definitely think it will create an ecosystem where a lot of these things would be the natural course. We would take the natural course and would very much be ingrained and imbibed in the ecosystem. So in my initial remarks, I'm not going to go into specific examples, but I'm going to take a pause here and let all the senior people take a lead on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd take a moment to welcome Professor Patankar from the Symbiosis Center for International Education to our panel. Having heard you with your kind of freshness, I'd invite PRAMATH to share his initial reflections on philanthropy and higher education, and if he can make a little more sense of public-private partnership in this context, it'll be very helpful. Over to you, Pramath.
Thank you, Sudarshan. It's good to see you, and thank you, Kritika. We meet 2 days in a row. While Kritika brings freshness, Sudarshan, I like to stick to what I know, and what I have to say, I've said many times, and it's not fresh at all. For me, philanthropy in India has meant building institutions based on collective philanthropy. Examples of individual philanthropy or institutional philanthropy towards one institution are fairly common, right from the BITS Pilani days and the Tata institution days, and embodied in some of the institutions represented here, whether it is Jindal or Shiv, Nadar or Symbiosis. I think what at least I have seen is that there is a new movement, I should say, in India, where people are willing to contribute to institutions that others are building. And that's really what I've tried to exploit in the last 25 years, not by myself, but in partnership with a bunch of my co-conspirators, both at ISB and Ashoka. And what we call it, what we've termed it, for better or for worse, is that it's a collective philanthropy and a shared governance model. And the reason is that if you're building a new university, if you are taking the philanthropy from one family, one individual, one institution, then the governance also gets driven by that entity. And it's tough to separate the governance from the philanthropist. But what I found was that in building institutions, it was longer term, more sustainable to separate the philanthropist from the institution. But how do you do that in the beginning? Because in the beginning, when people are putting in money, they behave like entrepreneurs and they say, hey, this is my money. This is what I'm putting. Even if their intent is very clear that it's non-profit and there is no ulterior motive. Even so, with the right intention, people tend to want to play a role in whatever they are building. So how do you separate the philanthropist from the governance becomes a challenge over time. So to break that, what we said was we were going to take money from lots of people. In fact, we would try not to take money from one single dominant individual. And we would give everyone who's giving money the same say in the running of the institution. So of course, there's a threshold, but you don't get extra seats on the board as you would in a company if you gave more money. And that's very important to set the rules of governance, that no one person has disproportionate say in the institution. And the last thing I'll say about this is that this then prepares the institution for alumni to come in as founders over time, or philanthropists over time, having equal status with the original founders of the institution. So at Ashoka, for example, we already have 2 alumni who just graduated 13 years ago, who now have a founder status at Ashoka. And we made that happen deliberately because we want the original founders over time to be phased out and for the alumni founders to come in, which then sets the university on track for hopefully running for decades after we are gone. So I think that's really the model that I've been trying to create and I feel very passionately about, and partly because neither am I personally wealthy enough to build a whole university, nor have I been able to find somebody who wanted to just do that. And there is nothing wrong with that. It's just that we are trying to build a different model compared to what the Birlas and the Tatas and the Shiv Nadars and the Munjals and the NIITs and the Jindals have done. And I think that's really very interesting to see that more and more people are coming on board, that if I don't have enough money to build my own university, I can contribute to building another university, which is not my alma mater, which is hard to convince people, especially because the US universities, which you mentioned, are also very aggressive about getting their alums to contribute there rather than here. The last thing I will say is that because of this combination, the private money comes in to build the infrastructure, to fund the initial deficits. But as you go forward, you can then start to access some of the public money just for research. And that's how the public-private partnership kind of gets built. The last thing I'll say is all universities in India are actually public universities. Even we who call ourselves private are really public universities because, Jindal and Ashoka are both Haryana universities. Shiv Nadar is very much a UP state private university. I don't know about Vijaybhoomi, but either you are a Karnataka university or a deemed private university, which is what...
We're a private state university in Maharashtra.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, we are all public universities which have, in fact, been asked to fund a public institution with private money. And that's the license we have to run what we do. I'll stop there, and I'm sure we'll have more discussions going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, it's what you've done by way of collective philanthropy is quite remarkable and quite unique, because you either have individual philanthropists who lend their name to their institutions, and Jindal University is such. It's in the name of Mr. O.P. Jindal, and the main benefactor is his son Naveen Jindal, and so the name is there. It's also the case with many universities. This model that you pioneered for Ashoka is remarkable. I would like to take that up, and others may have viewpoints on that. But one of the things that seems to be missing is foundations in this country that are professional. You see, the point about the Ford Foundation or Rockefeller is they may carry the name of the initial benefactor, but they have nothing to do with any of the Ford companies or any member of the Ford family. And likewise with Rockefeller, it's just the name that suggests that historically it began in some such way, but they are professionally managed. And the decisions that are made about grants and whom to support and so on is done by a group of program officers who are professionally recruited. I don't know whether we quite have it. I made an attempt when I was in the Ford Foundation to create the National Foundation of India so that it's entirely national. It doesn't carry a label foreign foundation. But, and so we have that working in a very modest way. Then there's the India Foundation for the Arts, which I was also involved in supporting, and supported by a large number of Indian corporates. But, we don't have that part of creating foundations that would, support a range of things, make endowment grants to the to universities or support a research project within a university. We are not there yet. But then, our experience in Jindal is limited to liberal arts and social sciences. But the Shiv Nadar University is a complete, full-fledged university with science and engineering departments, as well as social science. So we'd like to hear Professor Ananya Mukherjee's views on what we've been talking about.
Thank you. I will begin by both agreeing and disagreeing a bit with Pramath, because yes, the model of collective philanthropy in Ashoka and our, Mr. Shiv Nadar's philanthropy, out of which the whole foundation and the university was built, is certainly first and foremost individual philanthropy. But for any university, the dream is always collective, even though the philanthropy is individual. No university can be built by one individual's. And Mr. Nadar was this is his most famous quote, which I really love, that the Shiv Nadar University is the collective dream of many, including me. That's his quote. And he wanted to build something very specific, that is a research university, a residential research university where research is built into the curriculum from day one. So that kind of vision, which is, very common in other parts of the world also, is certainly a difficult one for any philanthropist to bring to fruition without a large number of stakeholders coming together. And even from the beginning, when all the core funding was from the Shiv Nadar Foundation, certain very important things were built as public-private partnership. For example, the Atal Incubation Center, which was part of the National Incubation Mission, and 8 campus centers were built. And one was on the Shiv Nadar campus, where funding was brought both from the government and from the foundation. And now, as you said, that our science, this was Shiv Nadar's dream also, to build facilities for basic science research, which is not available in the country, particularly in the private sector. So now that the foundation has built that with significant amount of investment, now our faculty is going around and seeking funds which are available for research funds. And our very great hope is, but we still have to work it out, is when the National Research Foundation is fully operational, that private universities and public universities have level playing field, and that private universities are not left out of public funds or serving the national mission. Like today, I was at the program of the National Quantum Mission. And there are many interesting models in the world for public-private partnership in there, and we could, experiment with many of those in India. I spent 27 years in Canada. There, almost every university is a public-private partnership, because every university runs primarily on tuition, and depending on the tuition and the enrollment, the government gives a grant which is per student funding. And this is to make sure that there's a certain level of enrollment in every area, in every university, and that fees are kept within a certain band. And then every university seeks research funding, both from private foundations such as Ford, Rockefeller, etc., as well as the government, because there are national science foundations. So in terms of both funding the core educational mission through tuition funding, as well as research funding, all Canadian universities are great examples of public-private public-private partnership. Does it always work perfectly? No. Are there ways of improvement? Absolutely. But in India, we are kind of in the earlier stages of the partnership, of these kinds of partnerships. But I feel that if we become the two conditions which will promote more philanthropy towards private-public partnerships. One is that it has to be outcome driven, and aligned to a broad set of goals. So for example, if India's leadership in quantum is a goal, then we bring together stakeholders to, like the Ashoka model, we bring together stakeholders to serve that goal. One of the goals I'm very passionate about is having more women in STEM in India. If that is a national agreed upon goal, then we bring different stakeholders to serve that goal. So that is one, to get unified on a goal. The second one, I think, was raised already, is our governance. So higher education governance has a long way to go everywhere. India is not the only place. But if we are going to be stewards, and that's how I look at my role, for example, I'm not just an administrator. I'm a steward of somebody's philanthropy. And the wealth of that person could be given to any number of causes, but it is coming to this university. And that bestows on me and the entire leadership a whole new level of accountability, that out of 100 other projects, I am the one, and the other 99 are not funded. I am the one who is funded. And that brings a whole new level of accountability for the university to the philanthropy that is being available to us. But that sense of accountability, be it government funding, which is, again, national wealth, national resources, be it private, be it philanthropic, that sense of accountability in university leadership and university governance is a number one issue that we need to address.
Thank you very much. That, I've got much more clarity about the phrase public-private because of your elucidation of it and your experience with Canada. Let me now turn to Professor ANITA PATANKAR for her views in this kind of first round of opening up the conversation.
Thank you, Professor SUDARSHAN, for having me as a last-minute replacement for Pro-Chancellor Dr. Vijaybhoomi, who's unfortunately got stuck in a very critical meeting that she cannot get out of. So thank you for having me and for giving me this opportunity to maybe bring in a different angle and a different perspective to how I look at higher education, and philanthropy. And maybe it has to do with the fact that I have spent around 40 years at Symbiosis, whose genesis, I think, is very unique. And I think that's important to the discussion that we're having today. So if in 1969, middle-class botany professor felt that foreign students in Pune were not being treated well, and that they were struggling with racial discrimination, and that is the root of your not-for-profit institution that didn't start as an education institution. Chancellor Dr. Muzumdar is very clear that I never thought I would set up an educational institution. I was setting up a cultural center where foreign students in Pune could come together and they'd get some solace. I would help them with accommodation and learning English and where to get food, and if they fell ill, what was going to happen. I think the growth from that root and the root of why an institution is born is very crucial to who that institution turns out to be. Those existential questions that organizations ask as they go through teething problems and then through adulthood, I think for us have always been very clear that we were established for African primarily, as well as Asian students. Did he call that philanthropy? I don't think he did. He just felt that was his calling. Today, we still work with that. Our vision is rooted in that international understanding for quality education. And for us, quality education translated into these foreign students and these students who then later on came in from different states in India for opportunities, that would they get jobs? Would they be able to go back and help their parents maybe pay off loans if the loans were taken to come here? I think that we've steadfastly, unwaveringly stuck to. I don't know whether we call it philanthropy or not. I think we just feel this is who we are and this is our vision. And we are driven and inspired by our Chancellor, who still says this is who we are. I think over the years, what has happened is that we've experienced, and this is where, you know, both Pramath as well as Professor Mukherjee talk about collective. I think we've experienced that when there's a great idea, when people in society see a benefit from an organization that exists for something, some cause, some value, I think you automatically garner a lot of support. And I think we have been honored and privileged to have from local governments. You know, we run a small school for the Pune police for years. It happens. And I think it happens because they realize that this is what you were born to do, and this is your vision, and this is what you would like to continue to do. Around our university, we have some 38, 42 plus villages. We work in this as a part of our job. Whether it's the hospital that offers free services, whether it's our mobile medical van, there's a digital literacy van. We now work very, very with great focus in areas of women entrepreneurship. We have a Section 8 company that works as an incubation for students and for the local population to set up, startups. I think what we've seen is that whether it's the local government, whether it's the state government, teacher training, we're good at teacher training. We now work with, for example, the Maharashtra State Faculty Development Academy. And these are things that have grown organically. Similarly, with the corporates, whether it is, we're working right now, for example, with Bajaj, we're setting up labs for, training for students and people who don't have access to the right kind of facilities. So they are setting up so many labs across the country to, school, PG, UG level. We work with Infosys. So I think when I look at philanthropy, I do think it is something that now every Indian, and I'm talking only about higher education, every Indian who's committed to education in India has realized that this is not a war we can fight alone. I think I'm seeing more Indian universities talking to each other, more industries talking to each other. I think that the Indian higher education ecosystem must be a co-constructed space, must be a collaborative space. Otherwise, the challenges are far too many, and our might to solve those problems is far too small. So we are seeing a lot of collaborations, and I'm glad. I think, in a way, the national education policy spurred this conversation, that there was going to be a churn in the higher education space. I think CSR, just our understanding of the world that we live in, and that higher education systems cannot be ivory towers as they used to be once upon a time. I think that understanding has led to people, my seniors and others who are on this panel, to understand that, call it philanthropy, call it CSR, call it what you will. Use it in research, use it in community engagement, use it in service learning, use it for setting up programs that might be niche and might not have, a bottom line that gets met. Choose your areas, but there are contributions to be made. It is no longer about offering degrees where people will get jobs. Today, students are also more demanding. Today, we don't even know what we're preparing them for. I mean, Pramath Sinha sir and I have been on so many conversations about liberal arts, in which we've said, why does liberal arts work? And liberal arts works because now suddenly people have no idea of what the world is going to look like, in a few years, and what are we preparing students for? And how do students succeed if the world around them is falling. And I think that understanding is crucial, and therefore governance structures, transparency, meeting expectations, all of these are things I think that come as long as the desire is there. But the good thing about the Indian higher education system is that it is so huge, and we're catering to such a diverse, heterogeneous student community that everybody doesn't have to do the same thing. Philanthropy is not something that every corporate needs to do. Many of them can't even afford it. It's also not something that every higher education university can afford to do, because many of them have very, very different challenges to face. But I think there's space enough for people who can take the step forward. Today, the government, whether it's local government at the Pune level, the city level, at the taluka level, district level, or at the national level, I think they've all understood that, put together, and then we can make a change. Otherwise, with our population, etc., we know all of this ad nauseum, right? That the world is going to be a very difficult place to manage with so many challenges. And I think the other thing that's really good, and I'll end on this without taking too much time, is that there are so many countries that are facing exactly the same. There are many global challenges, but the context and the realities that we face are very different. So climate change for us is very different than, let's say, an America or some other country. But look at what's happening in Africa. Look at what's happening in Asia. Look at what's happening in, for example, South America. And you will find that we're all very similar. And I can see a lot of traction happening there in terms of the so-called global South coming together and saying, let's solve our problems together, because together we're a bit stronger. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was fascinating. Very, very insightful, your remarks. So let me, turn to a basic issue. We have Professor Altbach, Philip Altbach is on campus, and he remarked about how Symbiosis, Shiv, Nadar, Azim Premji, maybe he had to say it because he's on our campus, Jindal, are really extraordinarily good institutions. But the landscape of the public universities is very bleak and it's sorry because of serious shortage of resources. So I'm wondering if we could come up with some ideas where there could be some way by which, instead of simply, they are very large in so many students and so on, there's almost a sense of despair, or people seem to have given up any hope about the improvement in the quality of education in public universities. Whereas, you have oasis of excellence in both research and teaching in some of the universities we've mentioned. So, in one sense, can there be a kind of public-private partnership so that, we somehow, because on the one hand, if you want more students to benefit from better quality education, it's a public good, and a public good is generally financed by the state, or it has to be financed by philanthropists who believe in the public good. It's not for profit by definition, all universities are. So are there any ideas about what we might do about this? Otherwise, we might get into a big gulf. Some of the concerns I have in my university is we have all these international collaborations and so on. But at the end of the day, all that hard work in having these agreements and, students get a chance to go abroad, get 2 degrees and so on. The beneficiaries of it are a small group of students with rich parents. And there doesn't seem to be some kind of a fund which could support a deserving student with an opportunity to go have a semester abroad. So these are concerns. So I'd like all of you to address the resource constraint, and this possibility of, instead of all these international collaborations that we have, which benefit only a small number of well-off students, What about possibilities of collaboration with the public universities so that together they too can improve their standards and their quality, and more students can benefit from quality education? Some ideas on that would be grateful. Canada's example of public-private partnership, having a kind of a fee structure that allows access as well as resources that go to where there is quality, seems to be a way forward. Let's discuss that. Can we begin with you, Professor Patankar, and then I'll go to the other panelists.
So immediately while you were talking, it struck me that there are a few things that have actually already started. For example, under the NAC, universities are already mentoring other universities in their state and in their area that need help. I think that's been a great move. For example, we are mentoring 5 universities. They're all public, government-aided universities. And it's helping because, as you're right, there is this huge discrepancy and you don't want the gap. It's not just between the private and the public, let's be honest. It's also within. Not all private are doing really, really well, and not all public are not doing well. But I think there is a gap, and as you said, it's education is a public good. How do we work towards that? I think it's also started through a lot of collaborations. For example, Pune has had these discussions in the past few years, Symbiosis with the Vice Chancellor of Savitribai Phule, Pune University, and a couple of others, in terms of how do we share resources. If we have a laboratory that has absolutely cutting edge, let's say, media technology equipment, whereas Pune University has maybe a chemistry lab that is the latest equipment. Should we duplicate? And we decided, no, we shouldn't. We should have students move, faculty move, work together, so you could actually book a laboratory and it would be much, much cheaper. And therefore, these kind of arrangements, I think, have already started, though it's small and maybe it needs to grow. But I think there are huge benefits that we've already started seeing. You're right. We look at collaborations traditionally with the West. We've not looked towards the East. We've also not looked within our country. Okay. And I think Indians need to learn to share much more than we do. I'm sorry, that's my personal opinion. But I think it started. When I meet faculty, for example, I do a couple of sessions for the Maharashtra State Faculty Development Academy. And when I look at them, I realize that they're always hungry, and they come from small universities and colleges across Maharashtra. And we are hungry, and we're not just the only ones. MSFT has reached out to 10 other universities. So we're all getting pulled in. When the NEP sessions were happening, in which we were talking to faculty about implementation. Because the NEP is great, but the implementation is, devil is in the details. And how do you implement it? I think that has already started. We also see this. We have a program called SCOPE, Symbiosis Community Outreach Program and Extension. And we have a lot of faculty and researchers who come from other universities and working together, with the villages, because ultimately this is our home. So I think we've started seeing it. We do need to offer a little more. One of the things that Symbiosis does is, encourages and incentivizes this kind of work for its faculty and staff. So maybe, that is something that could be tagged on, because ultimately it is time, that faculty and staff are spending. But I think it started, needs to grow definitely much more.
Thank you. Professor Mukherjee, on this point.
Yes. So first of all, we cannot give up hope on public institutions in a country like India. It is just not feasible that these universities like ours, we need to build our public institutions as best as we can. And I think I'll go back to what I was saying, that if we agree on certain outcomes, So, for example, teacher training. Every conference I go to, I hear that there is a need for teacher training in particularly in certain areas, but generally there is regular faculty development programs are necessary. We have lots of faculty development programs, and I don't know that each one of them are the best way to do it. But certainly that is an area where resources can be pooled. And we know that, the backbone of education is our teachers. And I would say one more thing that, a collaboration between the private and the public sectors need to start for school education also, because the universities universities need the foundation of good K-12 education in order to succeed. So there also we have a large diversity of schools, but we have a tremendously aspirational, there's a tremendous hunger to learn. So if we could at least start in the later grades, before they come for the board exam, to think of what kind of partnerships are possible, then I think we would have served the cause of higher education already to the children the students who are coming from school to university.
Thank you. Pramath?
I don't want to, there's nothing new for me to add. I completely agree with Ananya about you can't give up on public universities. It's just not possible. And even if we try to help a few universities, we are so immersed in our individual efforts, and that just takes up, that in itself is so challenging, because we are also growing, and we also have challenges with, limited supply of high quality faculty, giving a great experience to our students. And because essentially we are not established yet, all of us are evolving and growing. Also trying to do something outside of our domains is tough. I think the way we are contributing to the public domain is by bringing in some of the students who would have otherwise gone to the public universities, so maybe reducing the burden on the public universities. And maybe through our work, opening up some of the thinking in the education system so that public universities can benefit. I would like to take some credit on behalf of all of us, that it's because of the creation of some of these high quality universities that you all represent that NEP is what it is, right? And in some ways and measure, all of us had inputs into that. So I think that's how we are contributing, if it may not be directly in the way that that could be suggested. But I completely agree with Ananya. I think the public university system has to leverage online and technology much better, is something I've been talking about for a long time, but that takes us very far away from this discussion, so I don't want to go there. But I think that is also the only hope to be able to meet the needs in this country.
KRITIKA, what do you have to say about this?
So I think a lot has been said already. So I definitely think, just to first zoom out a little bit, I think the next 23 years for India are going to be very exciting. Because now we're on this roadmap to become a developed nation by 2047, and that's what we have taken upon ourselves. Also, I think, this is a time where we are seeing that at least at the national level, the government is doing quite a bit. There is focus that you can see towards education. So if you see this time's interim budget, if I'm not mistaken, 1 lakh crores was actually earmarked for research and development, research and innovation. We have the National Research Foundation that has been opened as well. So definitely, I think that there is going to be, more and more funds that we are going to see that is going to come our way. Now, coming back to the core issue of public universities, obviously we can't do away with them. But having said that, the core at this issue that lies is the fact is the lack of good quality faculty resources that exist in the country. I think that's a problem that public universities as well as private universities today are suffering from. And that's a larger issue that needs to be addressed, that we need to push a lot of our young talent to also look at a career in academia. So now, to address this problem, I totally agree with Sir. I mean, what he's saying is that we are so consumed by our own ecosystem problems that, for us to take a mantle on like this becomes very difficult, right? There are daily challenges that we are facing within our ecosystem that we need to firefight. But I think the key to that is, I think what, Professor Mukherjee has been trying to say, that we need to find aligned goals. A good example that I can give of that is, so I remember, I think in the second part of last year, we were approached by the Manipur government. So while there was this whole crisis that was going on in Manipur, and in the crisis, a lot of the younger population of that particular state was getting involved. Obviously, education was suffering. There was lack of direction in the youth, and the state government was very, very concerned about, how do we channelize this, youth population positively. So they reached out to a bunch of universities like us, and they said that, why don't you come to our state? And why don't you organize some sensitization programs for all our state government school teachers? Now, how did this align with our objective as a university today? So as a university, I mean, what we are talking about, being very clear about your mission and vision. For us, it is about, fostering an environment where a student can self-discover themselves. And self-discovery is very key to us. And that's where we saw an alignment with this program, that, sending our faculty and our students to actually engage with them. We did this virtually as well as in person. We had our faculty that actually went to, two different areas to cater to the two different communities of Manipur, and actually did in-person workshops for the state teachers there. And they did workshops on, giving them awareness about what are the different career domains that are available. It also sort of, along with the awareness that we were giving to them in terms of, what are the different career options available that they can educate their students about. It also started giving us insights into what are the various problems that the state is, facing, or what is it that these schools are facing. So in university, we have something called the social immersion program that every student mandatorily has to go through. So where it's a credited program where basically, you have to work with either an NGO, or if it's a ministry driven or a state government driven project, where a problem is identified, you're led, by a faculty, it's a group of students, and you basically give a solution to that problem. So while we were interacting with the teachers at Manipur and the state government there, we actually started getting, a sense of what are the problems that probably at a university level we could integrate in our SIP and our students could help with.
Great.
So this became a win-win situation for everybody. And we did a similar exercise with the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which we did in Srinagar. So, I mean,
what wonderful example. Yes.
Yeah, so I think
it's very, very, uplifting to hear what you've got to say about this. This is the kind of thing where there's mutual benefit, and
absolutely
you can help. But we've got to close. We've got a few minutes left. I'd like a quick comment from each of you, because the question that the audience wants to know is, do you think that what you have accomplished in your institution is scalable, replicable? That's one. The other one is about benchmarking yourself to, say, the Ivy League colleges of the United States or something like that. My own view on this is that each of us has, as was explained, an organic way in which, as institutions, we seem to have grown. And so it's like asking an art critic to compare the Mona Lisa with the Last Supper or something like that. I mean, each is, can be judged for itself, but benchmarking requires that you compare yourself with something else. So on these 2 points, which the audience has raised, 1 or 2 sentences, and we would end a very useful and productive discussion, I think. So let's start with Professor Mukherjee.
Thank you. So I will again draw upon one of Mr. Nadar's quotes that I love. He says that it's great to benchmark ourselves against what exists, but that's not my goal. And he was talking about HCL. My goal is to establish new benchmarks and to change the way value is produced. And again, he was talking about the IT industry. I would talk about higher education, what Pramath was saying, that maybe the role we can play in our very small, modest ways while we are firefighting 100 different fires is to shift the thinking and to think about and to make new imaginaries possible. That's probably the contribution we can make. But in terms of, whether it's scalable or not, these particular models are not probably scalable right away, but India already has scale. Scale is not our issue. Our issue is depth and quality. And I think, with some focus on that question of depth and quality, we can achieve that, even if in small pockets, even if, not in a linear way, there'll be setbacks. But it is certainly, it is a mission on which we cannot give up, bringing more depth and quality to our education system all across in a country like India. It's not a goal on which we can give up. We just have to keep trying.
Thank you. Pramath?
I don't mean to sound jingoistic, but in the models that we in this call represent, in no other country in the world have universities been built of the quality and scale in such a short period of time with very little public support and with so much affordable access being provided at the same time. My home institute, one of my alma maters is the University of Pennsylvania. At Ashoka, in terms of percentage, we actually provide scholarships to roughly 50+% of our students, and 20% of our students get a free education. And in fact, we are so far been able to give a full needs blind and full need financial scholarship, which only MIT, Princeton, Stanford, and Harvard are able to do around the world, and Caltech. And I'm not trying to boast or compare. I think we've created a whole new model in our country. These universities have taken a couple of $100 million to get started, total in investments, which is nothing, peanuts. People give $100 million in the US to put their nameplate on a building at a university. So I think we've already innovated. And I think we are setting new benchmarks. Of course, we have to compete with them. So competing with the best is not something we are afraid of. We shouldn't be afraid of. But I think how we compete is going to be very innovative and different. We can't build universities that were built the way they were built in the past. We just don't have the time. We don't have the resources. We have to innovate, disrupt, and come up with new models, which I think we are already doing.
Fantastic. Thank you, Pramath. Kritika, the last word, 2 sentences, and we would be well in time.
So I think I'm just going to end on some note of positivity. I think in the last decade, the number of universities in India has jumped from 700 plus to 1100 plus. So one is that. Second is, I think, as Sir said, I mean, we've seen a huge quantum jump in the number of our universities. I think 148 universities of India were mentioned in this year's QS rankings list of Asia. So I definitely think what we're doing is absolutely phenomenal in a record period of time. But having said that, we cannot lose sight of the fact that our country is very unique. Our problems are very unique. We have a huge youth population to cater to. So the way we are going to be catering, we will have to create our own models, which I think we are on the route to do now.
Thank you very much. I think I'm very grateful to all these very inspiring. I mean, apart from being insightful, your comments have been inspiring, positive, optimistic. I think we need that. And I think all of you are, as leaders of your institutions, have been, seized with a passion to realize, a collective goal. And so I just take this opportunity to express my admiration and gratitude on behalf of the nation, so to speak, for what you are doing. And what we can in the future collectively do by having more conversations amongst ourselves so that we can learn. And the point that was made that we need to have many more conversations within the landscape of the universities that we have got, particularly when someone has achieved some excellence in some field. I think people from other universities need to get to know about it, learn about it, and be inspired by it. So let's be optimistic that all that would happen. And so I've now got some more clarity about this phrase public-private, because I was only, as an economist, thinking of contracts for building expressways or something like that. But now I understand it's more meaningful.
Public-private inspiration coming together.
Yes. Okay, thank you. On that note, we'll end with thanks to all of you.